Okay, so we're going to open this session. Welcome to everyone for the second part 2 of the PET-CT Academy webinar series. So those of you that joined yesterday to see really interesting information from Ian Armstrong, Ian is one of the panelists today as well. So just to let everyone know that we are recording this webinar session, and what we will like is there is a panel discussion, but it's also a question and answer session as well on performance and throughput relating to how best to use the latest technological developments in PET-CT. Obviously, based on yesterday's webinar, is with a special focus on the digital PET systems rather than analog. So just to introduce myself for those of you who are not aware of me, I'm Beverley Wallace. I'm Head of Operations for Alliance Medical. We also have with us on the panel to co-chair is Dr. Peter Julyan, who's a Principal Physicist at the Christie Hospital Foundation Trust. We have Silvana Santos, who is the Unit Manager of Sidcup PET-CT unit in the southeast of England. Silvana is going to talk about the before and after of the installation of a GE digital PET scanner to her unit. And this is a dedicated unit that was purpose-built to house this particular piece of equipment. From then we'll lead on to Dr. Ian Armstrong, who again is a principal physicist at Manchester University Foundation Trust. And Ian will conversely describe the experience of installing the Siemens digital system in an already established unit. Following on from Ian is Dr. Prakash Manoharan, consultant radiologist, nuclear medicine physician, as well as being the PET-CT Academy director. Prakash will guide us through the benefit, with the benefit of his vast experience, through the generations of the PET-CT and the potential of the new latest digital systems as well. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Peter, who's just going to link us in to what we can expect in terms of the features that are most beneficial when utilizing a digital system.
Sorry, Peter, you're just on mute there.
I was about to talk for you then, Peter.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Bev. And welcome back to everyone. It's good to see you again from yesterday. I didn't really want to say much today other than frame the conversation, hopefully to prompt some of the responses from others about how we use new technologies. And I like to think of it in this way, and please excuse my little cartoon of this, in that I like to think of a triangle of optimization of any new technology and how you want to use it. And there's various things you could do with new technology. We can use it for image quality, and quality is often something that's very hard to define. We can talk about noise and resolution and other physical attributes of an image. But ultimately, we're really interested in clinical utility, which is something that's obviously a lot harder to pin down. So we could use all our technology for image quality, or we can look at scan speed, and that may affect the compliance of patients and how we can scan patients that really can't lie down for long, reductions in movement, and obviously relates to throughput and ultimately the cost of scans and availability, and that there is a limited resource of PET scanners in the country. And then the other side is perhaps patient effective dose. And we know what that is for the traces that we give, or we've got an estimate of it, and how does that relate? But then how does that relate to CT dose? And ultimately, we're interested in a dose versus benefit to the patient. So I think manufacturers will often try and tell you you can do loads of all three of these. In reality, you can do some combination of them, and really then the question is, how do you find the sweet spot or the purple spot of the optimal of each of these factors? So with that in mind, I'll hand over to Silvana to tell us her experience from Sidcup. Silvana, over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So I'm going to speak a little bit about the Sidcup experience that we've had. So we've opened purpose-built, as Beverley said, for a digital scanner. With that in mind, we actually have 6 uptake rooms. We do have a pre and a post-scan room that will help with that throughput and that high speed that of a digital that gives us to the patient. We are counting with 10-minute appointments. We have GE scanner. We'll talk also about the Siemens one, but the one we have is the GE. And that's what we're doing, the 10-minute appointments with 6 uptake rooms. The design of the unit was completely thinking about the digital scanner, how much staff we would need, patient throughput, how we're going to work that around with the high speed of the scanner. As expected, we're always going to find some challenges to new units and also to a new digital scanner. There's not a lot in the country, so we do have to try to troubleshoot what it could happen and also think about when actually happens, what can we do to fix that. So I think mostly the challenges we had was image quality, not in the purpose of that we would have bad image quality. We do have great image quality. The issue is the quality compared to an analog scanner. Patients that do come to us, if they've had a previous scan, they would have from an analog scanner. How does that translate to the new results, the new report? Also, when the patients now go to be reviewed at MDT, they are used to seeing images in a certain way that won't show now in the same way. There is different values, there are different SUVs, different reports. Also, the RSACs will need to get used to how the different images are now and how we can compare them. Just because we are seeing a new spot, is it a new spot that was there, or is just there because of the digital scanner? It's just a new learning curve for everyone around this. And the other one would be staff. We've worked in PET-CT for years. We are very used to maximum a 20-minute appointment per patient. And that's already a high throughput PET scanner. How do we go and cut that in half, have a patient in and out in 10 minutes and still provide the patient care, still have great image quality, reduce the dose to the patient, reduce the dose to the staff, all of that sweet spot that Peter is saying? How can we achieve that? How can we go around all of that? And part of the challenges is training the staff and trying to achieve it. It's beautiful to see, yes, the patient is done in 7 minutes or 8 minutes, but can we do the rest around it? And that was one of the challenges we've seen. The first day scanning, we got delayed on some of the other tasks that we have to do. And one of them was the clerical. How do we do the paperwork quick enough? Just as a very common example that we still find it every day, and this is going to sound stupid, is I just need a toilet break. The time that we go to the toilet and come back, the patient has finished. That's how quick a digital scanner is. How do you cope with that? Do you have enough staff? Do you have enough people to work around that? And it is as quick as a toilet break. And still today amazes that, oh, patient's finished. Okay, we need to crack on. So it is working around that and trying to go around those challenges that we found from the beginning. It's great to have good technology, quick technology, but we cannot forget the human factor that we need to go around. And that's the main thing. What's the point of having such a quick scanner if the staff is not up to scratch to work around it? So we have implemented quite a different training pack, and although everyone was trained and used to a GE scanner, we still had to learn a lot and to change our ways of work around the digital technology. So I think some of the important points I would say for anyone thinking about a digital scanner and how to implement that on, be it an old service or a new service, is staff, everything that goes around staff and what you need to do it. If you're going to go for the quick turnaround and high throughput, remember there is going to be a very high load of reporting. While we used to report 18 scans a day, 20 scans a day, we can go up to 60 a day, depending on how much you have improved the scanner capacity and how many hours you're working. And then what the scanner feeds back to us, the new images, is it going to affect patient pathway in terms of reporting? Can we compare with previous images with an analog scanner? Is it something that it's better for the patient? Patients that are claustrophobic, they'll definitely prefer our scanner, but we need to think about in the future, is it something that we can always bring the patient to a digital scanner? Of course, in 20 years' time, that will be a yes, but now we are just implementing this new digital scanner in most of the units. It is going to take time for this to become the routine. And then, as mentioned before, is the MDT discussions. Do we need to train the consultants? Do we need to let them know that there's going to be a new image coming back? Do the RSACs need to discuss again with the MDTs what's going to happen? It's just a few points to think when you have a digital scanner and how can you plan for it, but it's definitely something that you need to think it. And that was it, just a very brief overview. The only thing I'll probably just add is, although we've opened a digital scanner, we took over from a mobile a mobile van that was on site. So we used to do 15 patients a day. We are going higher by the day. We've reached a maximum of 32, but it is going higher and higher, and we are expecting to go up to 50s in some future. Don't know when, but the challenges are part of this, and how do you overcome the challenges to get those higher numbers, but taking into account patient safety, patient comfortable, and also patient dose and staff dose. That was it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Silvana. That's very, very useful. I think what another point to note is, in terms of, you actually mentioned the design of your unit. Are there any features within your units that you would say are specific to enable the logistics that are required to actually take patients from uptake bays into the scan and then out of the scan, to enable you to scan between 4 and 6 patients per hour? Is there anything that's for a purpose-built unit that people need to bear in mind that may not be available in existing sites?
I would say probably the most important one for us is the pre and post room. So a pre-scan room where we put the patients before the scan while they are already changed, gone to the toilet, and ready to go as soon as we have the scan ready. And the same way, as soon as the scan finishes, the patient is taken very quickly to the post room, and that is a room where the patient can put their clothes on and can take the time that they need to settle, if they need to sit for 5 minutes. Those 2 existing rooms will give you the opportunity to do that throughput. Although we do have the 6 uptakes, as we've mentioned before, is the idea of a conveyor belt where the patients just go around. Of course, we can't lie a patient on a belt and just go through the scanner, go to the next room, but it's the ghost idea of it goes from one step to the other, and it's already pre-prepared to each step on the way. Although we do 6 uptake rooms, we need to think about something is, okay, not all patients probably need to wait on an uptake room, taking into account a call-in. It's a patient that doesn't need to wait. It does need to wait for an hour, but it doesn't need to be on a quiet, relaxing room, lying down, not reading. Gallium, exactly the same thing. We do 7 tracers at our unit where those patients that actually don't need to rest, we can put those patients on a hot waiting room. So to think in the future that if we don't have the availability of 6 uptake rooms, the pre-scan and the post-scan room are definitely a must. But probably the uptake rooms, if we don't have the space, think about a hot uptake room and design the diary that allows you to use that room and have 2 or 3 patients waiting together, watching TV, reading a book, whatever it is, but just a plain uptake room, a waiting room that it fits as an uptake room for 3 or 4 patients. Probably don't
That's
need the
very
space.
useful. Can I just ask as well, just to add in terms of the short amount of time that the patients are actually spending on the scanner, that has to help with some compliance, especially for the patients that find it very, very uncomfortable to lie flat for a longer period of time. But has there been any increase or any decrease or any changes at all with compliance for claustrophobic patients?
Yes, definitely.
Because it's a short amount of time?
A lot shorter. We are talking a standard patient, 5'4", 6, 7. It's done within 5 beds, and that's 7.5 minutes for one patient. And vertex to toes. I won't say a 6-foot person, but just about 5'7", 5'6". We can definitely do that patient in less than 14 minutes. And that is a record for the patient. That is already a vertex to mid thighs for normal FTG. We have never until now, we've been open since July, they had a patient who said, I am claustrophobic, I am really sorry, I cannot do that. And the other thing we've noticed, not just being more comfortable for patients, so they can also leave the arms up for longer. There is less movement on the arms for the patients, which does make a difference. And the other one is the breathing movement, because we are actually taking less time to take each bed. You see less of that movement between the lungs and the liver, and those horrible artifacts that we do hate, there are a lot less. And taking account gallium dotatate or PSMA on an analog scanner, sometimes you need to go up to 4 minutes per bed just to be able to get enough counts to see something on a patient. We can reduce that almost by half on a digital scanner. So the image quality, it is definitely a lot better, not just because of the scanner, but just because it's quicker. There is less movement, but still having the same counts.
Thank you, Silvana. And there'll be opportunity for questions when we've been through each aspect. But thank you. That's very, very useful. Oh, actually, there is actually a question from Anita. Has COVID impacted on the pace at which you can turn your patients around? I mean, obviously, we look at the additional elements associated with cleaning, but has that impacted your throughput?
Yes. Although we were thinking when we've planned to open with 10-minute appointments, we are currently doing 20-minute appointments still to make sure that we are doing the cleaning and follow the policy. So unfortunately, our capacity is about in half. So 32 patients, I've said, it's the maximum we can do now because of COVID.
Right, thank you, Silvana. I think that's a good answer. Okay, so moving on to Ian. Ian's going to give us an overview based on experience at Manchester University Foundation. So over to you, Ian. I see you've got some slides there.
There we go. The mute changes place when you share screen. Thank you, Beverley. Okay, so I'm going to give an overview of what had happened here in our department, and some of the considerations when we transitioned from the Biograph MCT, which we had from 2009 to 2018, to our Biograph Vision, which is a Silicon PM system. So first thing to think about was actually just comparing the two systems. And we've talked, or I talked to those of you that saw yesterday, I talked about this concept of effective sensitivity. And we can see here, if we just look at the theory, that you would argue actually that, oh, well, the Biograph Vision is 4 times as sensitive as the Biograph MCT. So you should be able to scan in a quarter of the time if you wanted to. But I didn't really want to just go with that straight away. I wanted to have very much a cautious approach. As you can see, actually, though, when you look at the intrinsic sensitivity, this is the actual intrinsic sensitivity of the detector. It's about 50, just over 50% more sensitive as well. However, one of our main limiting factors in the department was the fact that this is our uptake area for PET-CT. So we have 3 bays, one with a bed and 2 chairs. This is where we do our patient injections and uptake. It's dispensed in the room opposite here. So this was a challenge because we were worried that these were going to be full, and what we were going to do to cope with this. Well, I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we set up with the protocol. So when we first got the scanner, everyone was going, "Oh, how fast are you going to scan?" and things like that. I said, "Well, I don't know. Let's just see how it goes." So I thought a lot about the change in sensitivity, and basically stuck my finger in the air and said, well, okay, this is our protocol that we finished up at with the MCT, which varied according to patient size, weight, as you can see here. We had, as we can see there, a dosing protocol of 3.5 megabecs kilo up to 280, and then it was retained 280. So we extended the bedtime to try and compensate and retain image quality. So I said, okay, well, let's just start off with taking off 30 seconds of bed. That'll be fine. And it was. So one of the other challenging things was the transition from step and sheet, which we had on the MCT, to the continuous bed motion acquisition on the Biograph Vision. So again, there's quite a lot of work with some of the trainee physicists with us, and we looked at image quality, image noise in a phantom. I know Pete says you can just do a geometric conversion, things like that, but I always like to try and back it up with some image measurements as well. So this is what we started off doing, and you can see this is not that quick really, and sure enough, I did get some complaints from the technologists saying, oh, the scans aren't really that much faster, but yeah, this is the first version. As I said, I wanted to start cautiously. I didn't want to just go on the bare facts and the traditional time of flight theory and say, okay, we're just going to quarter our scan times, because I thought that would be pretty irresponsible. So we didn't. And this is where we have now finally arrived at. So there's been 4 iterations through of the protocol and changes to the reconstruction algorithm and things like that. So this is now what we're typically, well, no, what we are doing on the Vision. And again, we've still got our weight-based, BMI-based changes in the bed speed here. And these are giving you the typical scan times that we're looking at. And really now, most of these patients, obviously those of you who realise for oncology, we're in this kind of region here. We do do some other subtle things, like, for example, speed up over the head, because the head's brain is full of FTG. So we get a huge count rate off it and very little attenuation, so we can go a bit faster there. If we ever do any whole body, what I mean by whole body is vertex to feet, we go a little bit faster over the legs as well. I think it's probably still a little bit more room to be done. So these are our scan times. Again, I showed this slide yesterday, but we're just comparing. So this is the current iteration of our clinical protocol for FTG. So we're looking at a median scan time of just under 9 minutes, comparing that with what we used to do on the Vision. So approximately a halving of scan times. Now, forgetting COVID, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? We had on our MCT half-an-hour slots. Due to the constraints within the department, particularly of the uptake bays, we worked at 20-minute slots for scanning. Now, those of you that don't know our department, we're a 50-50 split in terms of our workload. So our morning is actually rubidium cardiac PET, and we start doing our FTG from about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we run up till 8:30 at night. The gamma cameras finish at 4:30, so that gives us a little bit more flexibility in terms of where we can put the patients around the department for an uptake, and also when they've discharged, because again, our main hot weight uptake area is near our gamma cameras. So obviously our gamma camera rooms are shielded for 140 kV. We didn't want to stick a patient in there emitting 511 kVs in case we had some interference. So we did, that was nothing else that we looked at. So there are certain places in the uptake room that we could put them, but it was still, again, quite limited. So yes, we've halved our scanning times. Like I said, we didn't change our reminiscent activity. As I'll talk about that here, basically we get our activity from PetNet currently, or did do for most of the time. It's very concentrated, so, and we don't have an automatic injector. So asking them, the technologists, to draw up manually anything less than about 3.5 megabecs kilo, and we're talking usually about 0.1 mil sometimes for some of the doses, I think will be very challenging. So we made the decision from the start to not actually make any changes there. One of the metrics that I've always used in PET-CT for optimization for the scan protocol as a whole over the population is signal to noise measured in the patient's liver, which is a relatively uniform area of FTG uptake. So we just draw a relatively large region of interest, measure the mean voxel values divided by a standard deviation of the voxel values. That's our signal to noise metric. And it's been shown to be a relatively good surrogate of visual image quality, and has been used, it's used fairly universally throughout the literature as measurements. So obviously you can do things in things like anemia image quality phantom, but again, what we're really interested in is all of our patients. And this, for the first time now on the visions, what I like to see is that we've got a relatively flat relationship when we plot this against weight. When we had it with the MCT, we still had some fall off at our higher weight patients because for practical reasons we didn't really, and also the patient, we didn't want the patient to be having a 35-minute scan on the bed. So we accepted that fall off in image quality on the MCT. But now with the vision, this is something that we don't really have, which is excellent news. So this is one of the key things that I would do from optimization. And every time we've gone through an iteration of the clinical protocol, whether that be also the bed speeds, the reconstruction protocols, I've always come back, taken 100 or so patients, done a plot like this, and then, as you can see, we've got our various groups of bed times, and see, well, okay, if the green blobs here, for example, if you can see they're lined a little bit high or a little bit low, then we tweak this particular group of patients. So that was kind of really highlighting the input of mainly from the physicist from that protocol optimization. So that's image quality. This is our quantification. So we started, again, quite conservative, and I think I'll get another color ready. I'll go for green. So when we started with the vision, again, I was quite cautious, and we had just time of flight enabled. We didn't have the point spread function modeling. So we had something a little bit like that. So I said to the clinicians, okay, there is going to be some change in SUV max in the smaller lesions. Now we'd actually do some reconstructions with the NEMA phantom to match to the MCT, and I did some images like that, but one scan in, one scan out. So we didn't have the luxury of being able to scan a patient on the MCT and then put them on the vision. So there was no way of enabling a direct comparison from lesion to lesion, because as I said yesterday, yes, you can match things in the NEMA phantom, but there are so many different patient-related factors that you can, I don't believe, ever completely harmonize two systems from a patient imaging lesion perspective. It's just, I don't believe it's possible on two scans. You can get close, but it'll never be identical. There'll always be some subtle differences. So I said, yes, okay, you're probably going to get some increases, and they just learn to appreciate that. over time. And then when we got to arose to our final iteration, again, I'll pick another colour quickly. Let's go for purple. So I wanted to make use of the point spread function, the resolution modelling. Now, resolution modelling, as well as improving SUV max recovery, what it also does, again, is reduce image noise. So that was another thing in the toolbox, which will allow us to, again, scan slightly quicker, but actually, again, still improve image quality too. We still saw that increase of SNR in the liver. But I was very conscious of, so when we had the time of flight, the first vision reconstruction parameters, we had 4 iterations. If we put that on with the point spread function, we got recovery curves somewhere up here off the top of my graph. And again, I thought this is actually creating quite a lot of change here. So I was slightly cautious about that. So we rolled it back slightly and went to 3 iterations with a 4 mil of filtering. So again, still a fairly conservative filtering. I know there are some sites, I think down at UCL, they've got a vision there, and they do use a UHD reconstruction with no post filtering. So again, they'll be having very, very high changes in SUV max. And obviously, not without having direct contact with the clinicians down there, I presume they've gone through some kind of comparison process of, this is the quantification on this image, this is what we're doing with on this image. But again, it's essential that you do start to get a feel on how things change from patient to patient. So just a summary. So we didn't change our administered activity. So if you think back to Peter's pyramid, I mean, we were already, in my opinion, a relatively low dose. So capping our administered activity at 280, I think, was very low dose compared with a lot of practice around the UK. And 3.5 megabecs, I know some people might do 3 megabecs per kilo on the silicon PM systems. But again, if we had an injector, that might be something that we would entertain the idea of and evaluate, but we don't, so we didn't want to go through the added complexity and difficulty with that. We've decreased our scan time, but again, as we've seen, if you just go off the literature and all the marketing information, people will go, oh, you should reduce your scan time by a factor of 4. Well, we haven't done that because there's no real benefit to doing that, really, other than perhaps for patient comfort point of view. But when you're scanning someone in about 7-8 minutes, I think it's quick enough compared with what we would have used to have had. And having not gone to anything less than a 20-minute scan, it gives us that opportunity. We are seeing a lot more ill patients, a lot more inpatients, bed patients requiring transfers and things like that. Not all of our patients walk in and walk out. So again, that's something that we need to think about. I think oncology patients, from our opinion and in our site, are living longer. They are some of them are sicker than we used to see. So that is a very logistical challenge. So I think that was one of the conscious things that we did need to provide, that headroom in the scheduling to allow for things like that. And finally, obviously, being the physicist, I really did want to try and push improvements in image quality. So we've got a generally increased image quality compared with what we had on the MCT, and it is now it is consistent, and therefore hence more consistent than it would have been previously. And as I've said, with the change we've made, we've increased visualization. Again, there's some nice examples yesterday that I didn't really want to repeat again here. And we've got some changes in SUV max. And so there were no major concerns. I think it was a very careful process of step by step. We didn't just go for a massive big bang change straight away. It was very cautious because we didn't really, I certainly didn't have a feel for what to actually see out of the scanner until we started getting some of those first images off. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
Stop sharing. In fact,
So Ian, we have a question as well that may be aimed at Peter as well as the two physicists on the panel today. But Peter mentioned the sweet spot, and we looked at the dose time and image quality combination. As you quite rightly said, based on your manual dispensing at your facility, then that makes sense that you haven't altered that. But do you think there is a protocol that can be achieved from a national level that could be utilised across the board for digital scanners to look at the most ideal compromise, if you like, or the parameters or protocols for standard patient types? So we were looking at weight for certain.
I think you get close, but again, there's actually still quite a lot of difference between the various systems that are available. I mean, if you compare the 4-ring GE to the Biograph 600 from Siemens, there's quite a notable difference in terms of sensitivity. I think, you know, you really have to, the two systems that are comparable really are the 6-ring MI and the Vision 600. There aren't going to be any 6-ring MIs in the UK for a while, I would have thought. So I don't think you can just make a sweeping protocol and say all silicon photomultipliers can apply the same protocol. I think you have to really think carefully. I think you could get close. I think I'd like to see a harmonized administration protocol, and then again look at variants of scan time protocol. I think, you know, that's always the way I've tackled FDG optimization. And I think, you know, you'd probably be talking changes of around 30% from scanner to scanner in terms of total acquisition time, I would have thought. So, you know, all 4-ring MIs or 5-ring MIs or Vision 450s, Vision 600, you know, they'd all be roughly in you know, probably, I don't know, 50%. If you really want to be quite strict about it and say, this is my target image quality and this is what I want to retain. I mean, that's what I'd like to see. If you're talking about a harmonized protocol, that's what I'd like to see, is that every scan in the country has got a fairly uniform population, and we either say, okay, the scan patient population on that scanner is consistent, or we say the scan quality nationwide is consistent. And that's a far more challenging thing, because you either have to take everybody up to a high level, or perhaps bring some of those down at the top with the very sensitive scanners downwards slightly. So I don't think it's something you could apply everywhere. I think there would have to be variability in variants for particular scanner models.
I think that might be quite a nice opportunity if we had all 3 OEM digital systems within the UK to have a group of physicists and clinicians working together to see how close we could get to some kind of uniformity and harmonization. I'll leave that one there. Okay, so thank you very much, Ian. Moving on next to Prakash, who is going to talk through the generations of PET-CT and the potential of the silicon systems.
Thank you, Beverley, and excellent description by both the previous speakers about the experience in the transition process. So it's not just replace one for the other and you put it the highest max speed and make it run. It just doesn't work like that. There's lots of optimization that's required, and it's actually an evolutionary process in trying to get these sort of systems working for the clinics. And I'm just going to tell you about my own experience. Ian had a slide yesterday that showed PET to PET-CT, and then from the photomultiplier tube to the silicon technology. So what are the generational jumps? The generational jump was from PET to PET-CT. That was a big technological jump as well, because we could get the morphological imaging in with the PET data. So that was quite a good jump in a sense, because we could see the hotspots and annotate them to the anatomical abnormalities. That transition was not too difficult because we sort of understood what we were looking out for. After that, it was just evolutionary. People were tinkering around with technology that's already available, but not really a huge difference to the detector technology that Ian described very eloquently yesterday and today. So the next jump has been from the photomultiplier tube to the silicon detection methodology. And I've thankfully had the experience of actually reporting scans from central Manchester, because some of our patients get the scans there and then get other scans here. And with the F-DOPA pediatric cases, they are scanned completely at the vision system. And then we do a concordance report between the 4 consultants for pediatric cases that are very highly subspecialized. And because I've had the graduated experience of going from different system to a different system, you learn to accommodate and you learn to change. And that's the key thing, that you look out for the differences and you don't just make the jump looking to see what are the hotspots. So I think this technology, I want to try and encourage people to adapt, adopt, and to actually evolve with it. We should not reject technology just because we suddenly see too much. We just need to make sense of it. And I think that's the evolution that we are trying to encourage people to try and do, because I know at the outset, people have had, groups have had worries, appropriately worried that what they're going to see is going to alter clinical outcomes quite significantly. It could, but you just need to understand where you're going to apply it for. So with regards to scoring systems out there, and I'm going to pick on Deauville system, it will affect Deauville quite significantly. And therefore, we've had in the last 18 months quite a lot of robust discussions about the impact of lymphoma staging and restaging with regards to scoring systems. Guess what? We just have to do the work all over again. That's what the systems do. When you bring in a new system and you bring in a new numerical system because we're detecting a better quality data, we have to evolve. So the work has to be redone, but the principles don't change. The patient still has lymphoma and there is response. So if you look within the same scanner, there's clearly response. The response parameters and the numbers that we actually quote might have to change. And that's something to be welcomed because that's a good thing, that's progress. As I was trying the pre-chat, we're trying to aim for truth. What is the truth behind these sort of images that we're looking at? And within that sort of truth, we have to go to that triangulated sweet spot about what the patient's going to experience when they come to one of our scanners. And it's trying to put all that together and trying to get the message out to the patient that what we're doing is graduated. We know what we're doing. We have evolved into the systems. We are not rejecting technology just because it's new and we're seeing too many things that we cannot interpret and trying to deal with our own insecurities. And I think how do we deal with insecurities? We go through an education process. We do these sort of webinars to share our experiences so people feel a bit more reassured that there are other people out there who've been through the process, have had the experience, have had the insecurities of looking at these technologies and actually work through it. So it's not unsurmountable, and that's a key thing I want to try and get across. I think where this technology is really going to fly is with FDG, as everyone is aware, it's a very generalized tracer. So it's sugar metabolism. And we might have to just adapt at trying to and adopt the way we look at things that were previously normal and now we can see it. And actually we need to learn to try and ignore it because we might overcall things. And that's a learning process. But when it comes to more specific tracers, such as the DOTA-TATE and DOTA-TOC gallium scans, the PSMA scans, the FAPI, which is coming up very soon, it's a fibroblast inhibitor molecule, and PAPI, which is PARP, which is a PARP inhibitor. These tracers are going after very specific receptors within the human body. And so the count numbers are actually going to be a lot less because unlike glucose metabolism, which is quite ubiquitous and every part of the body uses glucose, the receptors that are actually expressed by these most specific tracers are few and far between. And actually we're going for specificity. We're targeting specific pathways. Now into that specific pathway, imagine putting a highly sensitive scanner like the 6 ring or the 4 rings into that play. We are going to see disease that previously we couldn't see. And that's a good thing because we're looking at specificity and sensitivity that's going to jump. And I think that's where this technology is actually going to perform quite remarkably with the other tracers that are coming on board. And that's how cancer is going as well. Cancer is becoming more individualized. We do not consider a patient with colorectal carcinoma as having colorectal carcinoma. They have different types of colorectal carcinoma. And into that mix comes different kind of tracers. So I think with these sort of hardware innovations that are happening out there and tracer development, things are going to get more interesting and more specific and better sensitivity. And I think the patients will benefit quite significantly by this new technological developments. So I think my role here is to reassure the community that these are all learning things that we can learn with our colleagues. And I like the way Ian's team did it in sort of gradually putting it up, and Silvana's team having to actually deal with the pressure of working through so many patients who previously were half the number. So it's all coping mechanisms, and we share these sort of webinars so that we can reassure the community that we're getting there together and share our experiences so we can actually get the best for the patient. So I think with that, Beverley, I'm going to leave it back to you to say, probably open the panel up to questions, I suppose.
That's right. Thank you, Prakash. So as we said before, this is a panel. It's a discussion. We rely on your questions. I'm hoping that there's been lots of information there that have got you thinking. So please, if you would like to post some questions to the panel, whether it's Silvana, Peter, Ian or Prakash?
Bev, can I come back in and personally, if I was having a scan, or if a relative of me was having a scan, and maybe I'm not a typical patient, but you know, I'd want you to nail me to the bed for an hour and give me a bucket load of whatever tracer. I don't care about dose, and actually for most of our patients, especially in oncology, the dose is negligible. You know, nail me to the scanner, give me a bucket load of FDG, fry me with a CT. I want the best image quality. And to be honest, I slightly despair that throughput is often pushed so much. And you know, and by all means, it's important to be able to scan quickly, because not all patients can cope with a long scan, and by all means, there may be particular patient groups where it is a real advantage to scan with lower dose. But surely we should be going after quality and diagnostic accuracy and utility, and also doing things like saying, well, okay, isn't 60 minutes really the best time to image FGG? Absolutely not. You know, we've sort of settled on 60 minutes because it's okay, and we're fighting counts, but we're not fighting counts as much as we used to be. What do people think? Go on, Prakash.
Yeah, I was about to take that one myself, but go on, Prakash.
Can I butt in? So it's about your sweet spot, Peter. It's about getting that sweet spot right for the service. And I think, you know, coming from an partly Americanized system, because I did one of my fellowships there, they did exactly what you did in the first generation. I'm going to use a wrong terminology. The first generation machine, we had the first PET CTs, one of the first 4 PET CTs in the world in Ann Arbor, where I did my fellowship. And they did exactly what you said. They gave them high doses, but they also were keeping an eye on throughput. So they were giving double the dose of what we gave actually when I came back to the UK. But the images were pristine. They're amazing images. And they managed throughput by giving higher doses. So I think there is a balance between all the sort of processes, because if we go for higher doses and better quality images, as you said, it's a limited resource, and cancer is only going up exponentially. When I started my life as a doctor, it was 1 in 4. Now it's 1 in 2. And onto that, we then have more specific traces like PSMA coming up, gallium coming up, where the protocols are already different and getting more complex. So I think optimizing any one of those pathways to a balance between throughput and quality is always required, because we all have our idealized picture, don't we, of the perfect picture, and we never tend to get that every time. And I think getting the balance right is equally important. So the sweet spot will change, Peter. The sweet spot will change with the new machines, and hopefully we'll get to a better sweet spot with the newer technology.
Could I just follow up on that too? So one of the things we have done at Sidcup was actually to study the data on waste mode, where we saw the image at 1 minute, 1 minute 45, 1 minute and a half, 1 minute 45, and then 2 minutes. So we've scanned the patients for longer for a period of time, and then we've studied those images. And one of the things we need to think is, do we actually reach a plateau of image quality that regardless of how much time you actually increase, how much that quality is going to impact on the patient pathway? If the lesion is already there at minute 45, why do we need to increase for 3 minutes if we can see that? And that's a little bit of what we thought about when we've tried to optimize the scanner is, do we need to increase more? Are we actually scanning the patients for what we need to see? We want it to be diagnostic, patient comfortable, and those responsible for patients and for staff. And that's one of the studies we've done was with the list mode, exactly because of that, for image quality. How much can we increase that we get to the point that there's a plateau? Is there any point increasing anymore if we've already actually reached a good level.
I think that's an important point, Silvana, so thank you for that. And just to reiterate, in terms of Prakash, it is a sweet spot, and you just described that as well, Silvana. I think we can't deny the patient experience as well. And let's face it, no one wants to experience lying on a concave table for an hour, Peter, I don't think. So I think we can lessen that and also reduce artifacts, breathing artifacts as well. We're going to increase image quality, all of the items that we've actually discussed. And again, actually, we really just think about our current situation with COVID. Do we want patients waiting around longer than necessary? Do we want people in the hospitals and in the units longer than we need to, when we can actually expedite them whilst maintaining an optimized image quality as well? And let's not forget the dose to the staff, not just the patients too. I hope that answers your question, Peter. There's a couple of questions that have actually come in from Ahmed Alenzi. The first one is, do you have an experience of using high energy positron emitters, rubidium and gallium, in PET MR? And you noticed high resolution image due to the reduction of positron range inside magnetic field. I think that might be aimed at you, Ian, because I know that you have a PET MR system at your site.
Yeah, the short answer is no, we haven't. I mean, doing rubidium on the PET MR will be extremely challenging to put the generator, the cart, in the room. I had this discussion relatively, and I think even at 3T, I think it's a fairly negligible change. I think there are far more other factors that would be at play. Patient motion, for example, particularly if you're looking at hearts, for rubidium. So I think we get a little bit excited by this, and actually when you look at it in reality, it's not, doesn't prove to be all that it promises to be. I think actually the gains in image quality that you get from the smaller detectors from these more modern silicon PM systems with the smaller elements is actually more of a dominating factor than anything to do with the MR. Now we do, and suppression of motion. I mean, we do on our cardiacs, if we can correct some of the motion of the breathing, and these end up looking like FDG scans, because this is actually what the dominant source of image degradation is. It's not really positron range. And if you think about something, positron range is what, 3-4 millimeters in tissue of rubidium. Your voxels are probably 2 voxels really. It's pretty negligible.
And for gallium, certainly, if you really try hard, you can see a different resolution with it. But when you compare FDG to gallium dotapeptide, they're very different traces with different count densities and contrasts. So it's not something that you clinically worry about.
Thank you. I think, Peter, you've already answered Ahmed's second question. For those of you that aren't aware, it says, do you think one day we'll not use uptake rooms due to the short uptake time? Peter's response being, we do still need at least 60 minutes for FDG. That's where we are. But again, Prakash mentioned FAPI as well. So it's whether or not we go back and investigate later relating to the FDG. But FAPI is much sooner, but it's early days, as you quite rightly say, Peter.
And just an add on to that, PSMA is 2 to 3 hours. So it flips around the other way. So you still need uptake rooms. The question is, can we back them all up in 8 rooms back to back, 10-minute injections apart, and then get them ready in a line to jump into the scanner and out into the other room? I think that's how it might go in the future.
To utilize a similar layout to Sidcup, which is as Silvana mentioned before, essentially a Jack and Jill, so in and out. Not in terms of the uptake bay, it's post uptake, but post going to the toilet and then just sort of a waiting bay almost. That sort of layout. But again, that works for a dedicated unit that's built around a specific system. It's not as easy in an existing facility. That's the challenge.
I think listening to all this, and again, something that's probably going to be marginally contentious, something that we've always prided ourselves on in this department, and it's a culture which we've had since Mary Prescott was here years and years ago, is showing empathy with patients and being considerate and not making them feel like they're on a conveyor belt, taking the time to deal with any sort of unforeseen issues or anxiety and things like that. And I have this huge concern that, you know, you take a technologist, take the patient into the room, say, right, I've got 30 seconds to get you on the bed, don't speak, blah, 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 blah. This is a major concern I have. No, these patients, they're anxious, they don't know what their future holds, things like that. And I think that is something that I fear is being pushed to one side as we strive for ultimate throughput. And I think that's something that just really we must not forget.
I think that's a very important point, Ian. But I think what we can do is we can compromise, because actually what we should be doing is providing an optimized patient experience as well. Part of that is obviously giving the patients the time they require. What that doesn't mean is that you don't have to stand there for 30 minutes doing that. It's quality in terms of quantity, and it's hugely important. But equally, the more patients that can actually be scanned on any given day means that the waiting time in terms of that patient's pathway is reduced. And that to me is a significant factor here. It's not about having as many people through the door as possible for the sake of it. It's actually making sure that the patient's end-to-end diagnostics and pathway is as expedited as possible, especially when we're looking at oncology patients. That's just my thoughts. But again, I think it's the training and the support from the units and the staff to ensure that absolutely, just as we talk about the sweet spots in terms of image quality, dose and time, we're actually talking about the service that we provide to our patients, because we're not talking about a production facility. We're talking about real people whose every second that they're in that department has an impact on them as well.
So can I add to that, Ian and Beverley? So actually some of this work can be done before they even get to the scanning site. And it's about prepping the patient so they actually do not then feel like they're just going to be rushed through. It's about no different to when you go to a site where if you know what you're going to expect, then you adapt to it very quickly. And I think if a lot of the work is done in the upfront part of it, so when they actually come to the scanning part, because the machines are quicker and patients, and there's a bit of throughput issue. But if you do some of the work, so they will still feel comforted and they will still feel taken care of, but the scanning part of it is actually going to just get a bit quicker. So we just move the boundaries a little bit, so that patient comfort in the end, we're all here for the patients, and that's a key aspect of it. And whether we like it or not, one day we're going to be one of those kind of patients. And so we would also like the systems to be patient orientated and patient centric. And that's something that I would say why this influence between the NHS systems and alliance systems has actually worked out quite well, Beverley, because we've influenced each other. We've learned from each other.
Absolutely.
We've learned a little bit more about throughput, and you've learned a little bit more about the patient path. And I think this exchanging of ideas is key to try and get the right thing for the patient.
Can I add from a personal side too? My background is I'm a nuclear medicine technologist. So I am the face to the patient, and I've been the face to the patient for the past 10 years. So I know exactly what you're talking, is that rush, the feeling. Before Sidcup, I've already worked at a very fast-paced unit at Guildford for Alliance Medical. And we've always had that care. Are we being too quick for the patient? Are we actually not giving the care? And we've never had a complaint like that. And exactly because of what you're saying, Prakash, is we prepare the patient before. We say, okay, from the point that you're going to be radioactive, we will try to avoid the contact with you. And this is something to protect us from all those. We're going to be here to help you. Is there anything that you would need? Do you need any help on the scanner? Do you need any help on the uptake room? Is there anything I can do to make you feel more comfortable? And now that we've moved to the digital, it's exactly one of the reasons why the Jack and Jill room works so well, is because we send them to the toilet with plenty of time to address any needs before the scan. By the time that we finish the previous patient, the patient is rest assured, completely comfortable, ready to go, and feels comfortable because they had 15 minutes on that room to do whatever was needed. We've prepared them in time. We've told them what's going to happen on the next step. And when we actually get to the next step, okay, where do you need me to lie down? And that's it, straight to the point, because they already know what's going to happen. And same way after the scan, we'll tell them we are going to wait in a room after that. We're going to check the images, and then we will tell you from that post-scan room that you are free to go. And if the patients feel that contact is being done there for the whole time, the patients won't feel rushed. And definitely the experience that we have at Sidcup until now, one of my technologists is listening to this presentation. She could rest assured say exactly the same thing. The patients are loving the treatment that they're having at Sidcup. They love that the unit is brand new. We have already patients who prefer to come to us than to other units because the scanner is quicker. The unit is beautiful, new, on a beautiful part of the hospital. It's very different to what they're used to. And we have a very positive feedback. So we still haven't felt that rushing through. And we do inpatients. We have to part slide patients. It's not just a common in and out FTG, beautiful, everything goes well. No, we have diabetic, we have difficult cannulations, we have inpatients, we have patients with wheelchairs, we have patients who cannot walk, everything. And as long as we have prepared for that and accommodate that before we actually start any process, I haven't seen it from a personal point.
Thank you, Silvana. That was really beneficial. I'm just noticing Peter Strahl has made a comment as well on the same subject. Loving the discussion regarding the patient conveyor belt. Interesting evidence from the USA says that so long as the patient receives a hearty hello and a fond farewell, you can rush them in between as much as possible as they are happy enough. I think it is that focus, and I think the point that you just made there, Silvana, is really important, because actually whilst we talk about patients having such short scans and sort of quick throughput, it's what goes around that's very important as well, isn't it, and how they feel. So that's very good. Okay, are there any further questions? I've seen no more points in the group chat.
I just wanted to make one point that might be useful. Sure. I'll try and be brief. Thank you, Silvana, for mentioning the point that it's very valuable to do things like list mode acquisitions of long acquisitions and test shorter acquisitions, and that we've done exactly the same type of thing in the past here, and that echoes very much what Ian was saying about you know, really looking at what you're doing. But the point I wanted to say that I think it'd be really interesting to see what comes out of, particularly in the States where they're using the 2 meter long system, and doing things like very late FDG, doing things like whole body kinetics to get measurements of kinetic parameters rather than this sort of slightly fudged uptake measure, which is SUV. So I think in the next in the next year or two, we will learn about whether it is a good idea to go for longer FDG imaging, how important it is to really push the quality to see tiny things, whether that does become clinically significant, which may be a different answer in FDG or things like PSMA. Yeah, just make that final point. I think some of these questions will be answered with the next generation technology, which is starting to get out there.
Thank you, Peter. So does anyone have any further questions or any points to raise? It's been a very informative discussion and panel, so thank you to everyone. I don't see any further, just checking on both. Nope. So thank you very much to all the panelists and to everyone who has actually dialed in to attend. As I said before, this session has been recorded, so will be made available. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you
Thanks
very
all.
much.